morning, and thank you for joining us. I'm Audrey Vernick, the Director of Patient and Family Advocacy for the Pediatric Epilepsy Surgery Alliance, and we're so happy to have you here today. We're thrilled that Emily Holl from the Sibling Support Project agreed to do this presentation on sharing the sibling experience, and she had this wonderful idea of having a panel of adult siblings join all of us so that you can hear from the lived experiences of siblings. Actually, all of us on this call are sibs in one way or another, living with a sibling with a disability. So I'm going to let Emily take it away, and we're really looking forward to today's session. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Audrey. It's great to be here. And I was really excited when we first started chatting, and you let me know that people were really interested in learning more about siblings. And so that's always really music to our ears, because our work is to make sure that people understand the lifelong concerns and also rewards that siblings experience, and to ensure that siblings at all ages have the information and support they need. So it's really exciting to be here with you all today. For those of you who are not familiar with the Sibling Support Project, we're the first national program in the United States dedicated entirely to supporting siblings of people with developmental health and mental health concerns. And that's kind of a wide umbrella. But what we find is that supporting brothers and sisters of people with a variety of conditions and diagnoses and issues, when we think about the similarities and kind of the commonalities of the sibling experience, we find that those really sort of outweigh the differences that many of those different diagnoses present. That being said, we are also really excited to work with particular populations where the disability diagnosis, health condition presents some unique challenges. And I think that's really true of our discussion today in talking about brothers and sisters of people with drug-resistant epilepsy. We do our work at the Sibling Support Project in a few different ways. First of all, by educating the public as much as we can through our books, some of which you see here on the screen. Our books are written not only for siblings, but largely by siblings. We're very proud of that. We also speak with the media every chance we get, and we really love it when journalists and reporters and podcast hosts take interest in siblings of people with support needs. And that's kind of my shortcut. Siblings of people with support needs. The support needs part is sort of my shortcut in talking generally about the work that we do. And of course, today we'll do a deeper dive into your specific population and community, and sort of the unique features and characteristics and experiences that you all share. So we also offer training and direct support to siblings and families. What we're probably best known for are Sib Shops, which are workshops for school age brothers and sisters, typically between the ages of 8 and 13, where siblings can come together at such an important stage of life to, first of all, meet other brothers and sisters and know that they are not alone in their experiences, to talk about the ups and downs of having a sibling with support needs. And I like to emphasize that the ups part of it, and to emphasize that Sib Shops really take a wellness approach and build on the strengths that siblings demonstrate and experience, while also creating a space for siblings to talk about some of the challenges that they may experience. And I think above all, the most important thing about Sib Shops to remember is that they are first and foremost recreation programs. So play is at the center of everything we do at Sib Shops because, after all, we're working with children. So if you're interested in learning more about Sib Shops, come to our website, see if there's one in your local area. And if there's not, reach out to us and we'll help you start one. We also have a new app that we're developing with Influence Innovations, which is formerly the Oregon Research Institute. That app is called Sib Time, and it's for parents to use with preschool age brothers and sisters, a previously unserved population. It's really cute. We're in phase 2 of testing the app right now with families, and we're receiving really great feedback. We also do trainings and webinars like this one, all kinds of workshops with parents, with providers. And then finally, we have 3 online communities for siblings of different ages. Those live on Facebook currently, SibTeen, Sib20, and SibNet. And they're really just wonderfully warm communities where siblings can turn 24/7, turn to for, validation, resource sharing, and just that, connection with people who really understand. So we're here to talk about siblings and to talk with siblings and to learn about sibling experiences. But why should we all care? I mean, like I said before, I was really gratified to hear that there was so much interest in this topic. But what do we know from the research about siblings and why it's important to care about them? We have dedicated all of our work at the Sibling Support Project to supporting siblings. Why is it important to do that? So I want to share just five, I think, pretty compelling reasons as to why we should be supporting siblings at every turn. Hello, Amanda. Welcome, welcome. Amanda's one of our panelists who you're going to meet in just a moment. But let's talk a little bit about, again, the big why. I like to refer often to the big why. Why do we do this work? And why is it wonderful that all of you are here today to learn about siblings? Well, the first thing that we know from the research is that sibling experiences really parallel parent experiences, and that just about anything that we can say about being the parent of a child with support needs, we can also say about siblings. Siblings experience many, if not most, of the same issues as parents, as well as some unique concerns and opportunities of their own. But if I look around at the services and supports that are available for parents as opposed to the services and supports that are available for siblings, it's kind of easy to see who's getting the short end of the stick. And I know that because we are, as far as I know, the only program dedicated entirely 100% to supporting siblings. And don't get me wrong, I think probably there should actually be more parent supports available. And the work that we do is to really advocate to make sure that siblings are really considered alongside parents and sibling experiences as well. The second reason I think it's really important for all of us to think about siblings is that sibling issues are lifespan issues, right? Particularly with something like drug-resistant epilepsy that has so many different stages, right? And it's important to recognize that brothers and sisters will most likely be in the life of the person who is diagnosed longer than anyone. Okay, definitely longer than any doctor, service provider, clinician, and honestly, probably longer even than parents. Okay, this is a relationship that can easily exceed 6 or 7 decades, which is a long, long time. So sibling issues are lifespan issues. And the needs and experiences of siblings will evolve and change over the course of the lifespan of the individual and the family, right? So we want to make sure that we're addressing those needs at all of those different stages, right? And I think about your population and people with drug-resistant epilepsy, and I think about, there's sort of like the pre-op, right? There's the waiting for the surgery, and then there's life after surgery, right? And those are some big, big changes that happen throughout those different phases. And siblings are along for the ride. They're here for it, and so we want to ensure that we are kind of addressing the needs of the entire family throughout all of those changes. Siblings also spend quantity time. What do I mean by that? Well, a number of years ago, a team of researchers from Vanderbilt University, they did this giant, basically literature review. And by the way, Vanderbilt has done some amazing sibling research over the years. If you're ever curious about learning more about research, reach out to us and we can point you in the right direction. But what this team of researchers at Vanderbilt did, they looked at sort of every major sibling study over the previous 40 or so years. And what they noted for for siblings. And they looked at actually data about siblings of people with support needs and sort of compared it with data about siblings of people without support needs. But one thing they noticed for all of these siblings, right? All of these siblings, people with and without disabilities, with and without support needs, with and without diagnoses, they noted that siblings spend a good deal of time together if you look sort of over the course of the lifespan, especially early in life, maybe for like the first 18 years, which kind of makes sense, right? We're probably living under the same roof, maybe going to the same school, and think back to when you were, maybe 8 or 9 years old, and family life is your universe. Right. So siblings spend a great deal of time together. And then again, sort of in the later years, siblings are maybe helping to address the healthcare needs of parents or maybe their own healthcare needs, and sort of what happens in between varies. But if you look over the course of the lifespan, siblings spend a lot of time together. And guess what? It's also really important quality time. I'm a big fan of inclusion if it's supported correctly. That's another webinar. But I will tell you that no classmate in an inclusive classroom will have as great an impact on the social development of a child with some kind of support need as his or her brother or sister, right? Siblings are 24/7 social models. So the time they spend together is really, really important. And then last but not least, something that I think more and more service providers, government officials, and definitely families are recognizing is that siblings really are the next generation of caregivers. And we have statistics on this, we have data on this, that siblings often are the folks who step into those caregiving roles later in life. But we also have research that tells us that many times siblings feel tremendously underprepared to serve these roles. And so there are a lot of really great resources out there that I think Audrey is going to share with you that really will help kind of invite siblings into the conversation about future planning and about just the care of their brother or sister. So, today's message, if it wasn't already loud and clear, is that we all really should be here, to think about siblings and to consider not only why it's important to support siblings, but how we can do that. So we're going to give you a little taste of some life experience that I think will answer some of these questions. First of all, might exemplify some of the things that we've talked about in terms of those whys. Why is it important to support siblings? I think the next portion of our discussion is going to really help bring that to life. And then also, we are going to talk about how to support siblings. We have some really, I think, insightful questions that have been submitted to Audrey ahead of time that we are going to discuss. And then also, so we're going to have our panel next. We're going to meet the experts, our adult sibling panel. Then we'll have time for Q&A. So we have some pre-submitted questions that we will answer. And then also, I'm really hoping that all of you will have some questions that you'd like to ask our panelists, because that's what we're here for. So without further ado, I would love to invite our panelists to turn on their cameras so that we can meet the true experts on the sibling experience. All right, here we are. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you all so much for being here today. I have to tell you that as a sibling myself, I've been on this panel many, many times. And I know, first of all, that it can be a little daunting to like open up your entire life, experience to whoever's out there. But I want to assure you that we are in, a very safe and friendly space where people are really just eager to hear about your life experiences. And we're in a space where we respect differences and really, really honor your stories. So thank you all for being here. I would love to sort of start by inviting you to introduce yourself. So tell us, first of all, who you are. This is going to be the easy question, guys. Who are you? Where are you? Okay, I think you all can do that. Who are you? Where are you? What do you do during the day? So what keeps you busy during the day? And then one thing you like to do for fun. All right, and let's start with Nancy. I'm just going in the order on my screen.
Hi, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. So I'm Nancy McNamara. I'm currently living in Michigan, in Novi, Michigan. During the day, I work as a pediatric epilepsy doctor. And I also have two children, so they keep me very busy. And for fun, I love to read. So that's my.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing, Nancy. For fun when you in your copious free time, right? When you're not being a doctor and chasing after your children. Got it. Thank you so much. Amanda, you're next on my screen.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Amanda O'Neill. I am based out of San Diego, California. And my day job is an attorney for students with disabilities. And then I also am a mom of two boys. And so currently on maternity leave for a little bit longer. And then I'll get back to that. And I like to go to concerts for fun.
Amazing. I thought you were going to say I like to sleep for fun because when I was in that stage, sleep was like really the best thing.
That
So
just doesn't exist. So
you're like, I've given up on sleep. So thank you for being here, Amanda. And last but definitely not least, Samuel.
Thank you. Yeah, as everyone said, thank you for having me. Very excited to be here. My name is Samuel Vernick. I'm in Corvallis, Oregon right now as a third year computer science student at Oregon State. And on my free time, I love to snowboard. So very excited for the winter coming up.
Love it. Yes, it is. It is getting colder here in Washington State. So definitely feeling like snowboarding is not too far away. Thank you for being here, Samuel. You all passed the first test. You introduced yourselves without even talking about your sibling, which is like not always what happens on these panels. I think we're always so tempted to just like talk about our brothers and sisters. So let us introduce now our sibling. Who you might have more than one sibling, but so we would love to know about your whole family constellation. In particular, we want to know about your sibling who is diagnosed. Who are they? Where do they live? What does their kind of day look like? What keeps them busy during the day? And then something about like the birth order, like where you are in the birth order, kind of thing. And let's go backwards. Let's start with Samuel.
Great. I have a brother he's my sibling, the one and only. His name is Bennett. He's living in San Francisco right now, and he works at San Francisco Playhouse, which is a theater, if any of you have ever been. Does plays and musicals, and he started volunteering there and has worked his way up to I believe, part-time, but close to full-time position. And he
Awesome.
was
And is he
born, he's
older
2
or
years older than
younger?
I.
Okay, 2 years
Yeah.
older than you. And does he live at home with your parents?
He lives in an apartment, but it is a unit that is attached to the house, so it's within striking distance, but an independent space.
Love it. Thank you so much for sharing, Samuel. Amanda, tell us about your sibling.
yeah, so my sister Kristen is 34 years old. She lives in Arizona in a townhouse that I rent out to her. And she currently is just occupying her time with activities she enjoys doing, bowling leagues, singing, and then taking care of my nephews.
Thanks so
And
much, Amanda.
birth order, I am the oldest of three. So I have a younger brother who's the baby, Kristen's the middle, and then I'm the oldest.
Got it. Thanks so much, Amanda. And Nancy, tell us about your sib.
Yeah, so there were five girls. I'm girl number five. And then my parents kept trying for a boy, so they got a boy. And the boy, his name was John, and he was a person diagnosed with epilepsy, the sibling diagnosed with epilepsy, when he was 5, and I was 10 or 11. And unfortunately, he passed away from his epilepsy 6 years ago now.
So sorry for your loss.
Thank you very much. But before he passed away, so he was 29 when he passed away, and he was living on his own, actually with his fiance, and worked as a mechanic, which was pretty remarkable because he had had epilepsy surgery when he was 11, and he actually had hemiparesis, so weakness fully on one side of his body, which is pretty remarkable that he worked as a mechanic and a tow truck driver while he was alive. Yeah.
That's incredible, Nancy. I mean, as someone who has full use of both sides of my body and could not do anything on a car, that's super impressive. And also, thank you so much for being part of this panel. I was really, really excited to know that you were willing to join the panel, even though John has passed so sadly, because I really believe that, well, there's an expression, first of all, in the sibling community, which is once a sib, always a sib. And our experiences with our siblings and as a sibling really shape who we are. And that influence, that impact doesn't end when the person is no longer physically with us. And so thank you for being here today to sort of share that perspective. I think it's really important. Next, I'd like to ask, we're gonna take a little stroll back to the past. And I want you to think about growing up. Maybe, I don't know, when you were in elementary school or somewhere around there. Can you think back to how you learned about your siblings' drug-resistant epilepsy? How did you learn about, and maybe it was younger, maybe it was older, but just thinking back to first discussions, observations, how did you kind of figure out that there was something happening? And we don't have to go in any particular order. We can just, whoever wants to jump in. Do you remember how you learned about your sibling's diagnosis? Nancy.
I was going to let Sam go.
Unmute.
I don't remember ever being sat down and having the discussion. I think mine was mainly observational. My brother kept having to be 911 would have to be called due to frequent seizures or clusters of seizures. And then, sometimes I'd get dropped off at a friend's house, or somebody else would be, making sure I got to school, that kind of thing. And then I just remember lots of hospitalizations for EEGs, for studies, for ketogenic diet, and then for surgery. So that's what I remember the most.
And so it sounds like, Nancy, you were really literally along for the ride and just kind of living with it without having really like a big picture understanding of what was happening. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, very, very accurate. But I was the seizure counter. I was pretty proud of that. I shared a room with John, and so I would kind of report out to my parents because they needed sleep the next morning, how many seizures he had, that kind of thing.
Wow. So yeah, a very important, a notable role for sure. And Nancy, it's so now you're like a doctor who specializes in this. Obviously, there were a lot of steps in between. Do you remember how you first kind of maybe understood or even heard the word epilepsy, heard kind of a diagnosis?
I think, I was so young at the time, 10 or 11. And my mom actually thought that the things that he was doing weren't seizures. They weren't obvious initially. I think can't remember everything, but I think it would sort of like touch a part of his body and had a very stereotype thing. And it was, after she finally got him into a neurologist. Neurologists are actually just hard to find. For those of you who maybe live in Michigan, they're hard to find. And so when he said, "Oh no, Mom, that's a seizure," I think I was there for that actually. And I remember that, he has epilepsy.
Thanks, Nancy. And just one more question. Do you recall how it felt for you to be experiencing like the seizures and all of the other things, the 911 calls? Do you remember what that felt like without sort of like knowing what was going on?
I just remember it being horribly scary, right? He was all of our babies. We always said he had 6 moms, the poor guy, because he was all of our babies. And so it was very scary to see this little toddler, this little boy, clearly not being in control of his body, needing rescue meds and going to the hospital frequently. And then once he's in the hospital, being attached to so many different things.
Yeah, that can be really scary for a child, especially if you don't understand kind of what's going on. Thanks for sharing that, Nancy. Samuel, you had unmuted before. Do you want to share how you learned about Bennett's condition?
Sure. So my situation is slightly different. I definitely also feel that there wasn't like a sit down conversation where it was kind of broken down to me. But my brother is 2 years older, so he's 21 right now. When he was having his operation, his hemispherectomy, I was zero. My mother was pregnant, and then I was born, and essentially was raised from the time that he had already had his surgery and was seizure free. So I didn't go through the process of hospital visits and like emergency calls or any of that, but I definitely did just sort of always see him. I never got to see him before his surgery. To me, he always had this. And so it was not like the way he was before and then the way he became. It was just that's the way he is. So I think I did start to understand some of the language as I started going through school and kind of like realizing, oh, there's like a lot of this is not something that anyone else has experienced. That's weird. I thought this was normal. Like this is just a pretty unique experience. I haven't met anyone like this yet. And then I engaged with conversation about it with my parents. They adopted a very if you ask, we'll tell mindset. So kind of any question I posed, they'd answer, completely honesty and just share all the info about, what the operation was and what the conditions he has are, and kind of also how that would shape our future. So I'm the younger sibling, but we never really had an older sibling, younger sibling dynamic. Um, the way I kind of think about it is like the surgery kind of reset to zero a little bit, and then we were both raised along a pretty similar track. And at a certain point, I started to become kind of the older sibling in this relationship. And that was where I really got a better understanding of like, oh, there's a developmental delay that happens here, and, pose more questions about how um, how exactly this process is going to work, and learned about going into the future, having to be a part of the care team, and, what life like him is going to be after we're both adults and fully grown. So it definitely was a long conversation over many years. Um, but there was no catalyst event or sit down talk. It was just something I kind of came to understand, as it was always a part of my life since I was born.
Thanks for sharing that, Samuel. And it's interesting because I think that's really common for a lot of younger siblings whose older sibling has the diagnosis or the disability. Because first of all, it's like this is our baseline. Like this is what we know. This is what we're sort of born into. And I know for me, my brother has developmental disabilities. I didn't really know that he was different until I saw how other kids treated him, right? So it's kind of like through the eyes of others, I sort of understood like, oh, okay, he's considered to be different. And it sounds like your parents did a really good job of just answering the questions. Like, just it sounds like you felt really comfortable being able to ask the questions, which is not always the case. So that's amazing. Um, would you say that? Would you say that that's accurate? Like you always felt pretty comfortable being able to ask the questions?
Absolutely. I think that was one of the more important things that they really instilled in me from the very beginning of not even with regards to this exclusively, but like open book, this is a safe environment to ask questions about anything you're curious about, including your brother and his disability and how that is going to affect both him and your life. So having that kind of open dynamic was absolutely crucial in both my relationship with my parents and my relationship with him. Of I would often go to them to ask questions of like, how do I deal with this situation as a sibling who who is a younger sibling, but also is often in positions where they have more responsibility than the older sibling. Like, how do I approach this balancing of like, we're siblings, I don't want to be a parent too, right?
Right,
Like you talked about these issues being a little similar. Um,
right.
so having an open line of dialogue was essential and really, really appreciated.
For sure. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I think that can be really tricky again for younger siblings, especially when the younger sibling might start to sort of surpass some of those milestones, whether they be social milestones or developmental milestones that the older sibling like may or may not one day reach, right? That can be, confusing, and it can bring up all kinds of different feelings. And it's really important to be able to sort of talk about all of those feelings that come up at those different times. So thanks for sharing that, Samuel. Amanda, last but not least, do you remember how you learned about Kristen's
Yeah.
diagnosis?
So me and my sister only 16 months apart, and she was actually diagnosed with epilepsy at 4 months old. So similar to Samuel in that effect, like it just was all I knew. And my mom is actually also a sibling of an individual who had, my uncle also had epilepsy caused from encephalitis. And so I was a sibling raised by a sibling. So I think that also helped in some regard of like understanding what that dynamic would look like. But I think very early on, it was a lot more doctor's appointments, her getting her blood drawn, and she hated that. She's a pro at all of that now. But, when you're an infant, basically having to go through all of that. And then she then went to developmental preschool, right? I didn't go to developmental preschool. We grew up in Arizona. And so seeing, she had speech therapy early on, OT early on. My mom's also a speech therapist. So it's just like our world. There was no real, like, again, sit down, but just what we were raised in. And then being the older sibling, it was always like, I'm the caretaker of both of them, right? So I'm sure my brother, as the youngest, has a totally different experience than what I may describe, right? But yeah, just like certain trigger words I would get when I was at school, like sweetie, I knew my mom, sorry. Stop triggering for me.
I know.
Was calling to tell me she had to go to the hospital. And so then I would be like, okay, I have to take care of Carter now. And like, what is he going to do? And like, who's going to pick us up? Right. So certain things like that. And even like later on, like my husband's dog started having seizures and like things you don't think are triggers. Like I immediately start counting how long the seizure is. And so like what Nancy was saying, like, that's just the routine you get into. Like, okay, how long has it been? Do I need to call 911? Because I would watch my brother and sister later on, right, as the oldest. So babysitting them, she had to get airlifted because my brother races BMX. So, a lot of that. And then we have video of her post-surgery and I can't even watch it. Like she's happy and like out of surgery and doing fine, but I just like still like it's so emotional for me because she didn't get surgery till she was 12. So 12 years of the impact of her seizures, and really 12 years for me too of seeing that impact. And so I definitely have a clear picture of the before and after. And so to your original point, yes, it's just like all we knew and all I knew. And same, so like seeing kind of different schools, different settings she would be in, and how to not feel like I had to give up anything that I was interested in to, because of her or vice versa. So I know we'll get more into questions about that, but yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing, Amanda, and thank you for being so open and vulnerable. And I think it really demonstrates that. I just think of you as like this like child who was like holding so much and like helping so much and being responsible for like responding to the situation, and also like the emotions that go along with that, they need to go somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? They don't just disappear. And so
Yeah.
Clearly still sometimes they come out, and I always say better out than in, right? And I think it's just so important to recognize that like those two things can and do coexist, right? Like this tremendously capable young child, young person, who also is feeling the feels that go along with it, and how we as parents, as providers, can really make space for both of those things to be, and to recognize the emotional part of it, and to just, create space for siblings to lean into that, and to be with siblings as we're feeling those things, and letting siblings know it's okay. I'm imagining when you were being this very strong, responsible, helpful child, there may have been part of you that felt like, oh, it's not, I need to like find another place for these tears to go right now, because I need to help and I need to be responsible.
Yeah, and I was always like, okay, I'm the perfectionist, right? And I'm sure a lot of siblings feel this way. Like I can't be,
Anyone?
yeah,
Nancy,
the
Samuel.
the burden, right? I have to help and be helped where I am. And luckily, my parents, of course, like gave me the space to be emotional about it. And I think about my parents too, like they're scared for my sister too, and now they're scared for me and how to support me and my brother, and then also her. So yeah, lots of feelings.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Amanda. And we had a question come in um, sort of about this that we'll address, at the end, but um, it's sort of like this idea of, well, if we know, like, we can't change the outcome necessarily, right? But how do we talk to siblings about this? Um, how do we manage the situation when we know, like, we can't change the outcome? And it's sort of like, just create the space for all of those feelings, and to not feel the pressure to fix it, because I think as parents, we want to fix everything, and we want to do everything we can for our children, all of our children. And if we could fix it, we would. But in lieu of that, I think a really powerful thing that parents can do is to, like, just be with us siblings on the journey, right? Like, meet us where we're at, recognize that we're part of it, be honest about what's happening. We'll get all into that, but I just, your experience, Amanda, just strikes me as being so related to that idea, that question. Okay, next question, moving right along. Think back to, childhood, maybe around the same ages that we were thinking about in the last question. Were there any special problems or challenges that you experienced as a result of having a sibling with drug-resistant epilepsy? And for those of you who are feeling like this talk might be turning a little bit bleak, I want to let you know the next question is going to be about the fun stuff, the good stuff, the silver linings, because we recognize that there are many beautiful things about the sibling experience and the sibling relationship. So hold on, the good stuff is right around the corner. But let's start with the tough stuff. And Amanda, you just talked about a lot of the challenges. Who wants to, if you think about just like one particular challenge, either with maybe friends, classmates, your parents, the community in general, what would you say? Nancy, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, it's tricky because you prepped us with some of these questions, but I have to say I don't know that I could perceive that I personally had any problems. I mean, the one big thing that I could remember was I had to quit my job at a candy shop when I was in high school to help be at home to help take care of the house uh, and my brother and my mom while he was going through epilepsy surgery and the recovery. But that was like, I wouldn't call that a problem. That was actually, I'd say, a really healthy thing was that I was allowed to help. Like that as a sibling, I liked actually being part of it. As I think about things in retrospect, I don't think I was ever made to be adult like too soon or anything like that. It was actually, oh yes, you're a member of the family. I mean, this is also probably just part of being a family of 6 children, right? Like, here's your job, you're the seizure counter here, and then now you're going to help put on meals, and just mom needs an extra hand, so you're the extra helper because other siblings are in college and away, right? So, but I wouldn't paint that as a negative thing.
It's so interesting that you say that, Nancy, because I think what you're really highlighting is that you always felt like you had a choice. Am I like summarizing, sort of? Because
I
you
don't know
said
that I
I
did.
didn't feel like I was like obligated or forced.
It was just what I was going to do. Like, they definitely did not give me a choice, but I wouldn't have taken a different choice, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, this was just the thing that was needed for our family at the time. And I was more than happy to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I don't
it
think
does
there
make
was a
sense.
choice. They didn't have any extra resources for that.
Right. Got it. But it sounds like this was something that you were willing to take on, and you didn't feel like you were sort of doing something that you really didn't want to do. Yeah.
No, it was actually like, the thing I could control, the thing I could be helpful with. And again, it's funny because I'm not a child psychologist and I have no expertise in that other than what pertains to what I do. But that was a really healthy coping mechanism, I think, for me as a sibling.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that, Nancy. Do you, just thinking about sort of, how can I ask this question? Do you feel like your peers and like others in the community kind of understood, or like maybe you didn't really care what they thought, but do you feel like maybe there were misconceptions about, maybe what you were experiencing, or do you think somebody might have looked at that and said, oh, like poor Nancy, she had to quit her job at the candy shop and, do this, like that? Do you feel like that was maybe a challenge in terms of like people not understanding what you and your family were experiencing?
I think we had more stigma just about it being epilepsy and him looking totally normal and people not understanding that part of things. It was a very like blue collar town that I grew up in. I had, classmates who had to work to help pay the bills. So that wasn't, I don't think people were feeling sorry for me, and I wouldn't have let them anyways. But I think from a family standpoint, getting at that, I think the hardest thing that we navigated, and I still reflect on this, I mean, 10 times a day when I'm seeing patients, which is especially when children look neurotypical, it is really challenging for schools, for classmates, for other parents to wonder why that child needs all that extra help if they look so neurotypical. And that's I think a really hard concept for people in general and in the community. I think the world has gotten better, in the last 30 years. And so I think people have just become better people in general. But I think for that concept, that's always just one tricky. And I explain that to parents all of the time. And I say, yep, you have to be an advocate for your child at the school because they will think, gosh, what's this family doing that the child's on medicines and they're still having seizures, or they need, all these doctor's appointments. What's going on? I don't know why that's a difficult concept, but it just seems to be kind of ubiquitous.
For sure. And I think it's really common, with those sort of invisible disabilities. It can be really, really difficult because, society has certain expectations, that are based on how people look and how they move through the world. And when the reality doesn't align, and there are maybe socially unexpected behaviors or occurrences, people really, I think the world has trouble making space for difference, like in general. And I think you're right. I think it's gotten better, in the past maybe 3 decades or so, but I think we have a long way to go. So I agree with you. Thanks for sharing that. Samuel, did you unmute at about the same time? Again, you guys are on the same schedule here.
Yeah. I totally get I didn't feel like I had to sacrifice too much as a part of this. Um, but definitely the understanding of the disability, right? Like going through life, and it took me a while to understand it as well, right? I think I kind of maybe misphrased it a little earlier. I wasn't like 4 and I was like, oh, I get it. Okay, cool, perfect. Will be no problems from here on out. It was a process for me as well to understand, hey, why is this so different? Like as I started to understand more social norms and how people develop as humans, and as I started to develop, I would start to question and be like, hey, why is this not happening the way I expected? But living with it, I got the opportunity to learn, versus someone like a teacher or a classmate, who really didn't understand, and I don't think really ever made an effort to understand as well. um, there were a lot of schools that we went through. My brother and I spent many years in the same school. So we went to elementary school together before He moved schools, and then my parents moved me as well after. Um, but during that time where we were in school together, I would see just how differently he was treated. Um, I know it's kind of a stereotypical brother thing, but it's like only I'm allowed to bully him. And also, you guys are treating him differently because of his disability. This is not poking fun. This is like seeing that and having to witness that. And really, these people didn't know or they just didn't care. Was really hard. I mean, it was absolutely much harder for him to have to live through that. But like to have to see a teacher or like people I looked up to or respected, right? He was 2 years older. Like upperclassmen are bullying my brother? Really? Is this what people do when they're older? Like I don't know. It made me view others differently and definitely approach that conversation with a lot more skepticism. Um, but also it made me want to educate friends and peers about it more, right? When I introduce someone to my brother, I want them to already be prefaced and understand a little more. But having that conversation for the millionth time, it doesn't get any easier.
Thanks for sharing that, Samuel. And that can be really hard. I mean, I remember my brother being bullied, older brother as well, and just feeling so sad, like just so sad that people were so mean to him, and also a little bit uncertain about how to respond, right? Because, I'm just one little person. Do I fight back? Do I stick up for him? Do I ignore it? And honestly, like, yes, all of the above, depending on the situation. But it can be really, really hard and really not a fun thing to learn about the world. So thanks for sharing that. Amanda, you talked about some of the challenges. What comes to mind when I ask the question?
I think kind of in the same vein as like the negative of not being the year that we were able to go to school together. She was bullied sitting by herself, right? So then like not being able to go to school with her. And so having to be at different places, and all of her, different settings were much more positive for her. She's had the same friends since she's been in kindergarten, right? So like better than me in some some situations, right? And so it's more of societally, systemically, right? Like I'm obviously a special education lawyer now, and so seeing like inclusion doesn't exist in my mind and in our current setup. And so getting, like Samuel was saying, like all these different people to have a shift in their mindset when this isn't their normal, right? This is our perspective as growing up. Like, why is this so difficult for other people to get? And then also, because of the invisible disabilities, having to overemphasize the supports they need, the disability, challenges that they have. So then it's always more negative, right? In that regard, because you're trying to convince someone that they need more support. And so leaving less room to highlight the strengths and positive, right? So then you become like, okay, now I have to be an advocate. And obviously that's where my career led me to. And so then that also kind of makes it, okay, where is room for the sibling dynamic, right? Because even now, like I get guilty, or I feel guilty, like being upset with her and reminding myself, like, I'm allowed to be upset with her. Like, she's my sister, right? I don't have to always put her in the other box of like, she's, this fragile being. And so, like, parents to know, like, it's okay for siblings to fight. It's okay for like that normal sibling dynamic. And that's just taken me 30 years to really wrap my head around, as opposed to like, okay, like she did something mean to me. I just like have to put it to the side and move on from it, or like protect her from the world, protect her from everything. And so not necessarily a negative, but like a different lens of like how to move through the world. And then with friends, I would say I just wouldn't be friends with people who would have not understood, or that just would have never been something I was interested in. And so making sure, like you said at the beginning, like inclusion, and again, we're so close in age, so we were kind of already doing the same things together anyway. And my parents made sure, like, bowling was her thing, singing was her thing, dancing was my thing. My brother had BMX. Like we always had our interests, and those were always supported, and no one ever had to give up anything for her support needs. And it was, having the village of my aunts and uncles, my cousins, my grandma. So like if she had to go to the hospital, oh cool, we get a night with aunt and uncle, right? And so that's more of like our special time with them. And I would say like we got to hang out with extended family more than maybe other families do, right? So
For sure. Having those other trusted adults in your life can be such an important resource. And I think something for parents to think about too, because parents are stretched so thin, like, especially depending on what's going on, health wise with the child who's diagnosed, to have those other trusted adults um, in the life of the sibling can make such a big difference, truly. And then, I really appreciate that you were talking about, sort of getting mad at your sister growing up and realizing, it only took 30 years, but it takes some of us a lot longer. Trust me. These days, I enjoy being angry with my brother. No, I'm kidding, but it took a lot longer. But for parents to understand that like those kinds of conflicts among siblings are not only normal, hate the word normal, but typical, they're actually really healthy. They help the children learn about give and take, hopefully things like conflict resolution. Because if siblings can't express those kinds of things, a lot of resentment can build, right? And so I think it's really important that you highlighted that, it's not such a bad thing for siblings to have conflict. In fact, it might be really helpful. So we do this panel sometimes with sibling pairs. And one thing that so frequently comes out is that when it comes to things like fighting or just these sort of like typical childhood experiences, we often hear the sibling say, I just wanted to be special every now and then, right? Like my sibling was always sort of, their needs came first and like they were like the special one. And then, the sibling who has the diagnosis says, that's interesting. I just always wanted to be normal, right? Like I didn't want the special attention. Great. Like you go off and have that, whatever. So it's just very interesting to kind of think about those two different perspectives. So thanks for sharing that. Okay, next question. I think everyone answered about the challenges, right? Yeah. So let's flip the switch and talk about the good things. And like it or not, somehow you all have already talked about the silver linings, like even with the challenges, because you're siblings and you're amazing. I'm a little biased on that, obviously, but can you think about in particular some kind of opportunity or I don't know, a silver lining, I think is a nice way to put it, that sort of came with the experience of being your sibling's sister or brother? A different perspective on life, could even be little perks. Yeah, Samuel.
Yeah, I can start us off. Um, I definitely think, as we've all kind of talked about, with added responsibility that comes with having this sibling and, taking on these tasks, and, being an attentive and responsible person for them, is you get to build up this trust with your parents and with your family, and a sense of independence that comes with that too. Of, we've already established you are responsible, you are doing all these things and you're following through, and you build up this skill set of, I'm going to say I'm going to do something and I'm going to follow through on it, and there's no doubt in anyone's mind in our family when that's going to happen, right? Like, because of this extra burden, you get the ability to grow more. I mean, like Nancy said, I didn't feel like I was forced to grow up faster or like skip out on my childhood at all. But I do think I was able to take on more responsibility quicker and gain more independence because of that, right? Kind of understanding this balance of, I wish I was special versus I wish I was normal. Like, I sometimes wish that I got more attention from my parents, whereas my brother wanted more freedom from them. So I got to like leave the house and go travel through the city on my own, right? Which is like uncommon. And he was not able to do that for many, many, many years. And kind of seeing And understanding, having that conversation with him really did make me see just the benefits that I got out of this, and how it was really difficult for him to have that extra attention, and he didn't want that extra attention. But I had the opportunity to, I got a job at a very young age and was not driven there, so I would just leave school on my own and I would go there every night, and it allowed me to start living independently very quickly, and also built a really good. Actually, I'll leave it at that and let others take over.
Thanks, Samuel. I think that's such an important point. And I think, I wonder if sometimes it's like with that responsibility and that freedom, right? Like the responsibility of being independent and the freedom of being independent. I also wonder if sometimes we take on too much and like feel like maybe we have to do too much on our own, right? That's something that I've heard a lot from siblings. So it's just a wondering for the crowd. I'd let you, if you want to address that or think about it for a minute. But I think it's just in general something to consider with siblings, that because we can be independent and we are independent doesn't necessarily always mean we want to do it all on our own, right? And so I think we just have to kind of be able to ask for help when we need it, which is something in my experience personally, and also working with siblings for many years. I think it's fair to say that siblings aren't always great at that, about asking for help when we need it. So, yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah,
just to quickly jump back in on. Oh no, actually, Amanda, go ahead.
No, you're fine.
Okay. I having, like I talked about earlier, the open line of dialogue with my family. They made it very easy to ask for help. And something that I found was not common even after talking with other siblings is they respected my struggle, right? They said, we know he has it hard, but we also know you have it really hard too. Like, we can see how difficult this is, and we respect and understand that. So having that open, just like, we get it, is really makes a world of difference, right? I've talked to people where they're like, their parents just kind of were like, yeah, but we have to do this. There was always a but attached to it. It was never just, yes, it's hard, we get it. And that made it very easy.
And
to
Samuel,
ask for
what
help.
you are saying is 100%. You're talking about validation, and having that validation is so important. I mean, so, so important. And when we talk about how, as parents, like we can't control the outcomes as much as we want to, how can we help the siblings along the way? It's like that validation goes such a far way. It has such a tremendous impact just to have that recognition that, like, yeah, we know it hasn't always been easy for you. It doesn't change, but it's like it changes something within you almost, right? Thanks for sharing that. Amanda, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, and in that same way, right? I know for me it was like, okay, I want to be the helper. I'm going to be the helper. I'm the oldest sibling. So again, like for both of them, different from just Kristen. And so, would I have benefited from maybe like a therapist or a third party outlet where the response was not, I was never worried about like hurting that person's feelings or being more of a burden on that person, so I could fully share what my experience was, instead of kind of building the framework of, I'm going to be a perfectionist, I'm going to do everything I'm supposed to do, I'm going to be, the best older sibling, and allow for some of that, because then that shapes who you are, right? You're more receptive to criticism, right? And more sensitive to criticism, like, oh, I can't have a problem that needs to be fixed because this needs enough fixing over here, right? Or I can't fix my sister, so I need to fix all of these other things in my life, which is definitely true. And how I perceive the world. But then I think too, and going back to positives and what we talked about, so many teachers and students have to be taught how to be just empathetic to this and what students need, and it has to be over explained. And so we just grew up knowing that, like, we didn't have to be taught you need to be more kind to people who have differences. And so that was really, I had a senior year project in high school of like who you are, and who I am was that my lens is of being a sibling of someone with a disability. And so that, like, I knew how to approach people and ask questions and stand up when something, hey, didn't really seem right. And it was never like, oh, I'm going to do this to try to fit in, right? Or be mean to someone to try to fit in. It was just, no, that's not how we do things. So I think that lens was helpful in just character building and being a good human. And now I get to help all of these families because I know exactly what they're going through. And so just my career and that I can help other people is definitely a positive in my mind. So yeah, there's plenty of positives. She would disagree with me probably, but yeah,
No,
I see that.
absolutely. And I think about what you said about, I couldn't fix the situation, with my sister, and then I thought, but look at how many things you're fixing in the lives of others right now, right?
Yeah.
And like how you're advocating with families and really making a difference in their lives. And so that's a pretty major silver lining. So thanks for that, Amanda. Nancy, silver linings from your baby bro?
Yeah, it's so hard to talk after those two, though. They're so articulate. Anyways, obviously, I became a physician because I actually, there are no physicians in my family, so I didn't actually know that you weren't allowed to treat your sibling. So I actually started down the path with the plans of trying to help him. And then I think the first day of med school, they're like, did you know that you're not allowed to be a physician for your family members or your children or your spouse? And I was like, oh, well, that stinks. So anyway, so yeah, so for me, there have been a lot of positives. I mean, I wish he had never had epilepsy and somebody had come up with a cure a long time ago. And I still hope somebody puts me out of a job one day with finding a cure, but it's actually, I feel like it's my therapy session for myself every day when I go to work and I take care of someone and I, look at the sibling who's there. Obviously the child is the primary, right? The child who's affected, but then the siblings, we don't forget about those. And then the parents, oh my gosh, the parents and everything you go through. I can't imagine having to go through everything. And so I take it out on, I take out my grief. I take out my grief about epilepsy, like literally every day, just by trying to make things a little bit better or easier for the next family. So that, I had to turn that into positive. You can't just go around being negative all day about epilepsy because then you're just not going to make anybody happy. So I feel really lucky actually that even though I started down the path with I tried to go into neuroscience to, maybe do some research on it, but I'm just not that clever. And so instead I went to school to become a physician. I'm just lucky that I landed in an area where I actually feel guilty for my siblings actually, because I get to talk about it every day. I get to, confront it every day. And they don't actually, because they're not in medicine. So I feel kind of lucky. They have all gotten a little bit more involved in the Epilepsy Foundation in our area, though, which I think is another healthy coping mechanism. So
Thanks, Nancy. Nancy, you're beyond humble, to say, well, so I just had to become like a regular physician. Yeah, no big deal. Medical school, whatever. Yeah. Anyway, obviously this panel of high achievers is like pretty representative of the sibling experience. Okay, so we've talked about the past. I want to look into the crystal ball and look to the future. When you think about your future and your siblings' future, what do you see? Like, what's the first thing that comes to mind? And for you, Nancy, it might be more about sort of honoring John's memory and his legacy, which I mean, I feel like you do that every day through your work. So yeah, future. What do you all see for the future? I can see Nancy and Samuel like trying to anticipate who's going to go first. I'll just Nancy, I'm just going to call on you first because you were just talking about your work.
Yeah, I mean, so tricky. And I actually reflect on what his future would have looked like, right? As he was continuing to have really frequent seizures. And I don't want to think about that. But anyways, so it's my work every day that I do. And I think about exactly some of the questions that you were prompting us to answer, which is, in retrospect, how could things have been done differently? I actually think about that every single day, and then I try in my work to change that. So what do I think he should have had earlier on? He absolutely should have had therapy the entire time, as we all should have. So it's actually one of the reasons why I just recently changed jobs, was to develop an integrated mental health component for all the children with epilepsy in our center, because I know why it's not done is because it's not cost effective and it's not attractive, but it so needs to be done, right? For the parents, for the siblings, for the children themselves, like throughout it. And it shouldn't have to be, oh, go see a therapist. It should just be embedded in. So that's one of the main things. And then I'm very active in epilepsy surgery, in part because of the things that my brother went through, which is, I felt like perhaps my parents weren't counseled appropriately about what was going to happen after the surgery and some of those things. And so I just funneled that into, well, I don't care that that's not the attractive way to set it up. This is the way it has to be set up. We have to be more thoughtful when we're having these really, really hard conversations, and we have to make sure that parents really understand the potential complications and the other outcomes. And then, the other thing is just kind of talking about it's really helpful to be able to talk to families and give them kind of an honest perspective of why we're being so aggressive with medicines and with treatments, or when we can kind of pull back. I feel like because of what I went through with John, like, that's the right answer. The right answer is being kind of balanced and maybe not pushing just one agenda. It's kind of what is right for that family, for that patient in the moment. So I wish I had millions of dollars and I could send up, scholarships and things for him, but I don't. All I have is my work. And so that's kind of how I, cope and try to honor him.
Thank you. Well, you're getting lots of love in the chat, so make sure to take a peek at that. Amanda, what do you think about when you think about Kristen's future and your future?
Yeah, I just made my parents and my sister go do estate planning for everything. Because my biggest thing, and again, like, I also learn through my work what other families are doing, and then how I can support my sister now later. And so I was the one who told my parents, like, getting an ABLE account, and now, like, go see a trust of, like, how to make sure her money is protected so she doesn't lose out on disability payments. And then and I'm not sure where all the participants are, but like, Arizona is a little bit different in what they do with that compared to what we have here in California. So being really mindful of, like, just chatting with an estate attorney to know. And so they had shared with us, well, an ABLE account here, actually, if Kristen passes away, that money just goes back to the state. So we want a third-party trust for her. So having that all set up. And then also talking with her about, like, who do you want to support you in the needs you have, right? When our parents pass away. And so talking about, like, what my role is versus what my brother's role is and what she's comfortable, and also giving her autonomy in that. Because as much as I would just like to make the decisions for her, I need to respect what she wishes. And then making sure she's near people, right? So my brother lives closer to her, so day-to-day support, that's probably going to be my brother. And then paperwork, more legal stuff, that's easily on me. And so just having those conversations early. I know it's so hard to discuss that and what happens when your parents are gone or other support people are gone, but having backup plans while it's fresh in everyone's mind is a lot better and easier than after the fact, especially on us as siblings, right? To figure out where my parents' assets are, and making sure, okay, Kristen can't get certain things because then she'll lose out on benefits. And also just starting to talk with parents of, like, how do you become a payee for SSI? How are you, the representative for DDD services out there and, DDS services here in California? And then, making sure, there's just plans, contingencies to plan, just having the discussion, I think is the most important. Because again, like we're starting this now and she's 34, right? It really should have been talked about much sooner because God forbid had something happen to my parents before now, right? And that was the same. My uncle, who I had shared had epilepsy, he also passed away due to his epilepsy. So, making sure there's plans in place if the individual themselves had passed and that their assets go to where they want it to go, not just back to the state. And then also making sure like we're still allowing her life to be meaningful in ways she wants it to be meaningful, and encouraging that. And same, she's been in therapy since she was an adult. She later got diagnosed with autism on her own accord, right? And so her starting to understand like what are her comorbidities from having 12 years of seizures, but then having what they would deem, right, successful epilepsy surgery, and then what comes after that, and how working through her disappointment of this didn't like cure my needs. I didn't get brain surgery at 12 and now I'm normal in her mind, right? And so also working through, and she is like so great at finding resources and doing that, but finding like driving through independence, like driving training for her and things like that. Just really there's so much out there that you don't know about it till you know about it, right? And so just there are things. And so for her, like driving was a huge milestone she wanted to achieve at some point, and we just didn't even know some of these things existed. And so she found that. And so understanding too, like what can be supported as adults, and what does the funding look like through, vocational rehab, and Department of Developmental Disabilities. And then also, like housing, what stipends you can get. Like she just told me, again, it's so funny because she says all this stuff, but she would tell you like, oh, she's very self-deprecating. Like, I can't do anything, right? But Amazon Prime, if you are on food stamps or getting support, that's 50% off that you get for Amazon Prime. And so there's a lot of resources out there to also help with funding. Like Uber, you get like $500 credits per year to help with that independence and driving.
So it sounds like really kind of like finding all the resources possible to enable her to be as independent as possible.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Amanda. Last but not least, Samuel, when you think about the future for you and Bennett, what do you think about? Maybe more questions than answers. Who knows?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The head of the care team for my brother is at this point still my mom. So she does the management of, right, all these different services, of the Able account, of what money goes where, but has talked with me, and I've talked with my family a lot about when that does become my responsibility, right? When it's a hard conversation to have, but like when my parents are no longer in the picture, I am now the head of this care team and will have another however many number of years with him, where I will need to know all of this information. I will need to know where all of his money is, what all of his services are, what different departments they're all coming from. Like there's there's a lot of technical aspects of it that I still don't understand, but I've also been kind of given space to not be in control of right now. Right, I'm in college, so I'm still figuring out my life too. As much as I would love to help figure out his, I think my kind of first priority right now is like, where am I going to live in 2 years? What am I going to be working on in 2 years? Like setting myself up for success, and then but still continuously having these conversations, and knowing no matter where he ends up going or what he ends up doing, I will be a part of that and a part of his life. But the end goal is as much independence as possible, right? Like I want him to be able to live on his own, and I want him to be able to live, controlling his money and controlling his assets. But it will likely not end up 100% there, right? Like that's the golden picture. But I think the one thing that I know for sure is we're both working towards that goal, right? He wants that independence more than anyone else. So all I need to do is work with him on that. And there's going to be pushback about, what services, and, there's a lot of difficulties in creating that system and setting up him how I might view best versus how he views best for his future. So just continuously having conversations, talking about it more into the future, and being aware of everything that's going on. Staying in touch. I don't know.
I love that. No, I think it's so helpful just because what you're saying is, as a sibling, you have a voice in those conversations, and that's so, so important. Even if there are more questions than answers, knowing that you can be part of the conversation is so, so important. I want to be mindful of time. I told Audrey that we would fill this time in we would need more time. She's like, if we end early, that's great. I'm like, oh yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. So I want to do a lightning round because I do want to have a few minutes just for questions from the audience. So this is like just a quick little piece of advice. What is one thing that your parents did well to support you and your siblings? Some of you multiples, most of you multiples, except Samuel. So what's one thing that they did well, and what's one thing that you wish they did differently? And Nancy already spoke to half of this, what she thinks they could have done differently. And notice I didn't say better, not what could they have done better. No, we're not here to judge, but what could they have done maybe differently? So one thing they did well, one thing they might have done differently. Nancy, do you want to start with the other half? Do you want to just talk about one thing you think your parents did really well?
Yeah, I don't remember what I said that they wish they'd done differently. They're great, but what I say, put us all in therapy? Yeah, probably. What I think they did well was, they took exceptionally great care of us every single day, and then they were very, very good advocates for my brother every single day, right? So whether it came to school or just getting him the best treatment available.
Love that. And obviously that's something they modeled that you continue to do today through your work. So thanks for that. Amanda, do you have a couple of
just letting us all be our own individual persons as well, and like engage in our own interests and not feel like we had to give up anything to support our sister. And then, now we're all in therapy. So maybe just start that sooner to be more reflective. And like I had mentioned, previously, just allowing the sibling space to also have their needs supported, right? Because we also have our own needs. So yeah, I'll say that.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And Samuel, you get the last word here.
I think I've spoken a little bit on both, but they were very, very excellent at, once again, supporting my interests and needs and allowing me freedom and giving me that responsibility. For better, I will say they did very well with it.
Differently.
But, sorry. my head was thinking about how it wasn't better, and so I said the word better.
I tripped you up a little bit there. Sorry.
One thing they could have done differently is I talked briefly about kind of being a younger sibling and also taking on a parental-ish role of trying to really respect our dynamic as siblings, and making sure that, I'm his brother first and a caretaker second, is really important.
Thank you so much. I could not have said it better myself. Thank you all so much for answering my questions. It's really been a pleasure, and I have learned a lot for sure. I'm guessing you have learned a lot about each other from each other, and I know that the people watching and listening have learned a lot as well. Audrey, I would love to invite you back. If there are any questions in the chat or of the questions that were previously submitted that maybe have not been addressed, which would you like to? We are ready and here to answer any and all questions.
Yeah, and if there anyone that is listening right now also wants to put a question in the chat, we could consider that question as well. I think, you have really touched on everything. One thing that I wanted to comment on is we did a sibling support project for about 2 years where we hosted a sibling support group for teens. The one thing that they said they wanted the most was to be more brought into conversations and solutions for their sibling, that they didn't want to be not told about things, not given responsibility. So I think there's just this, that's something that really struck me during this conversation today, is this idea of there is a responsibility and it is an obligation in a way, but we wouldn't want it any other way. I'm a sib as well, so I say the same thing. So one question would be, and I think you touched on this a little bit, Emily, is, but what would healthy peer support have looked like for you as a sibling? So peer to peer support with it. I guess the question is, did any of you ever meet another person who had a brother or sister, even with a disability, when you were growing up? I know you did, Sam, so I don't know if you want to speak to that.
And did
it make a difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think, very fortunate to be involved with a lot of specifically epilepsy surgery patients, right? I attended for many, many years Challenger baseball, and so volunteered with them and got the opportunity to meet a ton of families and a ton of people who had a variety of different experiences with this disability, and also meet their siblings. A good, not to name drop, but Thomas, I became very close friends with through his sibling, who has also has had a surgery. And so being able to connect with them and speak with them really was incredible, and brings a lot to the experience. Just someone who can say, I get it, and they really do.
Big plug for our conference, which will be next summer in Texas. And if you are thinking of coming, having that experience with the siblings, that's where Sam met a lot of young people who had a sibling, older or younger, who'd had epilepsy surgery, and they would just run around and play when he was younger. But just knowing that other person had been through the same thing, or side comments would happen, or something a behavior would happen, or a movement, the hemiparesis, playing catch, but it was all normalized for everyone. And I feel like our siblings don't have that experience. You have to seek it out. And then Emily, you spoke earlier about sib shops. Sam also did sib shops a half a dozen times or more. Again, he had a lot of other avenues for support, but I think just putting your child, that is the sib, in proximity of other sibs, it's really important. And I don't know, Nancy and Amanda, if you had that experience, but I think this is kind of a newer thing. So Sam, you're the youngest, so it kind of doesn't surprise me that you're the one that has had more of that. Also, you're my child, and I'm in this world of advocacy and learning as we go. But Nancy or Amanda, did either of you have any experiences meeting other siblings when you were young,
I
children
did
or
not,
teens?
and I would say, particularly, this was not my experience, but if, a sibling's feeling resentful, or like, oh, I can't just like have the typical sibling relationship that others have, I imagine that would really be pivotal in helping that dynamic, right? Seeing that is other people's experiences. And what you see at school is really just a very small pool of, people and what they have going on in their lives. So yeah, I think that would be a great support.
And I definitely never did anything formal, but I hadn't thought about this until you asked that question. But I had a really good friend who had two sisters with cystic fibrosis. So they were just in and out of the hospital for weeks on end. And so it's funny because she's so similar to me as I'm reflecting on this, right? She was just the big older sister and the helper and high achiever, and just wanted to be the helper.
Interesting. There were some
I think, I was just
going
to say, I think that's, it's really helpful to be able to be in a space where, first of all, you don't have to explain your whole life because everyone gets it, right? Like siblings say that often about sib shops. The other thing, and it kind of addresses a little bit of a a question that was asked previously. We have this amazing panel. You all love your siblings. It has been like a very positive experience overall. Someone asked the question about their 9-year-old who like really just seems to dislike or resent her brother, right? Due to like what she says, undeserved attention and praise he gets for things that she can do easily, right? She's like, well, why is that so special? I can do that. I never get praised for those things. And this parent is saying she's rarely kind to him. I worry this isn't a phase. I want to know how to best help her and find the kindness. And one of the things about Sib Shops is creating that space where children feel that sense of belonging. I mean, it's one of the most basic human desires to belong, right? Needs, really. But also the thing about Sib Shops, which is so magical, which is something that you can do at home, is that Sib Shops really celebrate the accomplishments of siblings and sort of celebrate who they are as individuals, not just as so-and-so's brother or sister. And so if you can find ways to do that, obviously Sib Shops are great, look for one in your community. But even as a parent, praising that child, celebrating her special gifts, but also allowing space for her to have kind of a bad day. And to know that like, you don't always have to be this super high achiever to be loved and valued can be really, really helpful. Supporting that child as their own individual, it's like putting money in the bank that they can then reinvest into that relationship with their brother and sister, right? Like if their needs are being met, they have more to give to that relationship. So just wanted to highlight that.
And I think just validating that's a very normal response, right? I mean, it's a very normal, typical response to say, hey, like, why is my sibling getting a little bit more attention, and just validating that so that they're not like internalizing it more, that they're more open to talk about what about it is more challenging. And then that dynamic, could evolve over time.
There was one question, I know we're at time, but the last question I think would be and this is a hard one, and we've kind of covered this throughout, but if maybe a lightning round to end. Well, from your perspective, what would be the single most important thing to help siblings make the most out of their special situation for their own lives? So I think it's what we've talked a lot about, but is there any parting word you would give to this? I think that as a parent, I probably recognize a lot of the attendees as parents. So we're watching both of our kids or all of our kids and wondering, how do we balance the needs of this child who's got a very complex medical situation with the one that is feeling left out or is being ignored or is having these expectations of care. I mean, I think of you monitoring seizures at night, Nancy. That's a lot to ask. And we do it because that's what we do. But is there one thing that we can do as a parent to help the sibling have benefit or just make the most out of their lives? It's kind of a big question, but I don't know if we can end on that.
Go ahead, Nancy. I can see you. I
was actually going to say, I think Audrey has to answer it because she did such a great job. I actually don't know. This is one of those things. I think it's kind of unfair as the sibling for me to know what I would have done or what I would recommend to a parent, other than, which is, I mean, at least from our three perspective, which is include us and let us be helpers. But I think there might be a little bit of pathology in that. So Audrey, how did you do it so well?
I didn't do it well. It's a work in progress. I do think like I said, from our sibling project, what we heard from the teens when they were saying we want to be included, I think we can't presume, and we never did this with Sam. It's sort of just how Russ and I are about as people, but we can't presume to protect our children from anything. Life is hard, right? I started teaching my kids about mentally ill people on the streets of San Francisco when they were 6, when we walked to school. Like I can't pretend things don't exist in the world and say, well, oh, let's cross the street and I'm never going to talk to you about this. So I did the same thing in our house as I would do in the world. When don't step in dog poop, don't touch the hot stove, whatever lesson it is, this is just life. And I always, for Bennett too, tried to normalize, yeah, you have a disability, but so do I. If I take my glasses off, I can't see. I have knee problems, so I can't climb mountains anymore, right? Whatever it is, everybody has a limitation. but normalizing that. And I think what helped you, Sam, in the long run is recognizing this is just the human experience. This is not like, I didn't do something to Sam by having him have a brother with a disability. And I think sometimes as parents, we feel guilty, like we're making the sib be responsible for so much. We're all in this bumpy, rocky ocean in a little boat with holes in it together. It wasn't a choice. It's not always easy. Sometimes it's sunny, sometimes it's not. But it's just about, okay, here we are. And I think Nancy and Amanda, you both spoke beautifully to this as well. It is what it is.
And I
So
think that I imagine, being a parent now, some parents may say, well, we want to overly protect the sibling from experiencing going to the hospital, going to that, but that just instills anxiety and fear in the sibling because you have no clue what's going on. All of a sudden you're gone for hours at a time. And so I think that's what all three of us were saying is like being brought into the fold, trusting that the sibling can hold that and have their own experience with it. Because otherwise it really makes a larger divide between the siblings than it needs to, and allows everybody to start thinking about what their role is. And me and Nancy obviously went into fields specifically for this. So, at some point there could be inspiration that strikes you in, what this will look like for your career. And I'm sure, Samuel says he's pseudo not in this field, but I'm sure you'll create an app that's helps with accessibility sometimes. And so, there's other ways that you think aren't traditionally in this, but, I think you'll find your way there either way. But yeah, just bringing everybody into the conversation and not trying to protect and not trying to make it something it's not. Yeah. And I think that's what you're trying
And
to.
I think also, within that conversation to be inclusive of siblings and also to allow them to have their own voice, right? Like there are siblings who will not want to be caregivers and who will not want to go into these fields, and that's okay. And that also might evolve and change over time, right? I think to really validate a sibling where they're at, to make space for those feelings, and to, yes, include them as helpers to the extent that they want to help, right? And to also, Sam, you beautifully said, yes, I think about my brother's future, and also like I'm trying to graduate and kind of get my life together, and you very clearly said, my parents have encouraged me to go out and build my own life. And so I think to the greatest extent possible, parents to enable siblings to have that space and that autonomy and to really figure out who they are and how they want to come to that role of sibling is really, really helpful.
Well, thank you so much all for being here today. This was a phenomenal session. I laughed, I cried, I had a big smile on my face, and I learned a lot, and I hope all of you did too. Emily, you just did a great job of facilitating this. And Nancy, Amanda, and Sam, I can't thank you enough for being here. And I look forward to seeing you all at our next event or Power Hour. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Bye.